r/AskReddit. Employees of Reddit, I was just accused of stealing water. What crazy accusation has an employee or supervisor made about you? Time clock thievery. While doing volunteer work. Edit for details. It was a simple volunteer gig. No major organization and nobody was keeping track of hours for anything. And it was not court mandated. We were cleaning up at the end of the day and I answered a phone call. The supervisor got all pissed and get off the phone. That's time clock thievery. Back when I was in high school, I worked for my town's parks department. One time, my boss, who was a total sleazeball who sexually harassed every girl there and hated me mostly for not being female, calls me into his office. While there, he accuses me of stealing a $3 check and then says that I have to be let go. I tell him point blank that if I was to steal from the debt, it would be something a lot more than a measly $3 check. What the hell would I do with that anyway? Later on, I find out from a friend of mine that he found the check underneath his desk. And then a month later someone finally reported him for harassment and he got fired too. Karma's a bitch, yo. Last night my manager called me stupid and uneducated for not cheating a customer out of $15 due to a computer error. She thought it was obvious I should lie about the error and garner another whopping $15 for the struggling hospitality industry. Today I go in for a beating to get scolded for not lying. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to burst into tears. My first job with the state was awful. My supervisor was an idiot in every sense of the word. I remember once, I was called into a meeting with our bureau chief. He asked us some questions about office matters. And my supervisor flat out made up lies about me that were completely against my character. I couldn't hold in my frustration and blew up at her. Told my bureau chief I wasn't there to play childish games. And then walked out of the meeting. I ended up winning that one. And got a promotion that paid twice as much as that terrible supervisor. It was one of those awesome revenge moments where nobody got hurt. When I worked at Circuit City, I had an 80GB iPod that my dad had given me because he no longer needed it. It was practically brand new. Even when I first plugged it into my computer, it came up as Richard's iPod. Well, one day it's in my purse that I kept under my counter while I was working. It goes missing. I couldn't understand how it had gotten stolen. It had been one of the slowest days ever. Nonetheless, I was pretty freaking bummed out about it. This happened during a time where the case we kept iPods in was broken and it was terribly easy to steal them. And many had gone missing. Fast forward a few weeks later. My co-worker tells me my recently left for another job debt manager thought I was the one stealing iPods and that he got into my purse when I wasn't looking and took it to check the serial number. But never gave it back because I was flipping out and causing a bit of scene walking around asking everyone if they'd seen anyone take it. I was so fucking pissed. I think it's great that a bad manager outed herself to the CEO. A friend of mine used to work for a well-known communications company. One day the CEO of the company visited the office. He went into the break room and counted the supplies. He then announced that he could tell from the proportion of coffee to sweetener that people were stealing the sweetener and taking it home. He then ordered the discontinuation of coffee service for all company offices. His name was Bernie Ebbers and it wasn't too long after that he was indicted for the biggest act of corporate thievery in history. I know this isn't an accusation that was made by an employee or supervisor. But I figured I would post it here anyway. About 5 years ago my neighbor accused me of stealing his fence. Yes. His fence. He said something along the lines of him knowing that I had taken it. And that he just wanted it back. I still don't really know how to respond to something like that. I had been working an IT job for about a year. This new guy starts. And on his second day he accuses me of stealing a flash drive off his desk. I tell him I haven't seen it. To which he replies, well, it didn't just walk off by itself now. Did it? I pointed out that he had left our office without locking it or even shutting the door. Which is against our security procedures that were outlined in his orientation that was just the day before. He complained to the CEO, smallish company, about 100 employees. And an hour later found the flash drive on the ground by his desk. He had knocked it off with his coffee mug. I worked in the stockroom of a Gordman's and I was accused of stealing a security cable that goes on jackets. Yeah. What would I do with one of those? Oh, and it turns out our store didn't even carry those cables. It was my phone charger I had in my hand. I worked at Sears. And I gave someone 0% financing for 6 months, might have been a year. I honestly don't remember, on their Sears card on a purchase. I thought we were running a promotion. Turned out we were not. Later, they threatened to fire me for stealing, saying I had stolen the money they might have made on the interest if the person had not made payments. After working at Subway for 5 years, 3 of those being a manager, I was accused of turning off the cameras in the store and getting high in the cooler. I quit shortly after. Turned out the owner was trying to set me up to fire me. In high school, I had got into a fist fight at a party, and my opponent had popped me in the nose. There was no bruising to my face, so there were no obvious signs of the altercation. I worked at a grocery store, and the next day I was helping my manager pull cases of toilet paper off of a high stockroom shelf. I was up on the rack, tossing the cases down to him. While doing this, my nose started bleeding again, and dripped blood on his pristine white shirt. He got incredibly angry, pulled me into his office, and accused me of doing cocaine on the job. He suspended me right then and there. Also, I was in a work program with my high school, and it nearly caused me to fail that portion of the class. Fortunately, I was in a union and filed a grievance. I got paid for the time lost and had my grade for the work program class restored. But none of this was easy, and I was being accused of being a drug abuser the entire time. I experienced several nail-biting weeks where I wondered if I was going to be able to graduate. They found a girl in the bathroom huffing hairspray. They watched the tape and accused me of selling it to her knowingly. I told them I'm not going to card people buying hairspray. I recently got written up for reasons that are unclear to me. Apparently I have become the IT department supervisor despite never being told this or getting a raise. I got written up for the department not meeting an impossible rollout schedule. 450 computers in a month with 2 people and no overtime allowed. All with dealing with tickets that come in for the existing systems. To top it off, they went straight to a final written. I had never even got a verbal before this. I was a chemist working for the Govt. For density we used to use pincometers, which were defined volume vessels with a hole for a thermometer, and we would perform our analysis on an old balance. We had extra money in the budget, so I bought an electronic density apparatus for a new balance. Anyway, my team leader, who was in his 70s, had no idea how it worked and forbid me from using it, telling the lab director I was making up science with the balances. The lab director walked me into the wet lab and I showed him how this new piece of equip would save us hours from having to do prep with the picnometers. He laughed and said, "This is the Gov, what's the hurry?" Pretty sad. I was accused of selling pictures of the Tiger Woods accident to TMZ, all because I bought a new car a month later. I was the first person on scene. Edit. Using better judgment to wait on AMA until a child sex rape case is closed. I would hate for me to ruin anything there. Work as an editor in television. Did a series for a production company and was told many times by the big bosses how wonderful my storytelling was. After the show ended, they asked me to stay and help edit some shows they had been doing for years. Day 1 of the new gig, the show's producer asks me what I think about the new show. Honest opinion? I ask. Of course, she says. It's too slow. Every episode feels the same and I learn nothing about the subject matter. With a little massaging we could make it a much more interesting show. I reply. Fired 2 weeks later because my editorial pacing is off. I can't prove it, but I know that bitch producer whined about me bagging on her precious show. One of the heads of the company actually had tears in her eyes when she let me go because I was giving her a WTF look the whole time. Silver lining. Next gig doubled my salary and got me an Emmy for editing. Suck it, bitch. When I was 16, I worked at McDonald's. I always volunteered for the early morning shift of the weekends because no one else wanted it. So, I would show up to work at 5:30 AM to open the store. One morning, I got a phone call at 5 AM in the morning as I was getting ready for work. Turns out, the manager was reviewing my time cards because it looked like 6 months ago. Instead of taking a 30-minute lunch break, I took a 26-minute lunch break, which is in violation of company policy. I explained that it was because the store was really busy and my manager asked me to clock in early to help out during the lunch rush. The manager on the phone said, "Doesn't matter. You should have known the rules, and just because someone asks you to break a rule, you should know better than to listen. We cannot employ someone who knowingly breaks company rules." And I was fired with less than 30 minutes notice. Turns out, since I had worked at the store since I was 14, I was owed a significant pay bump once I hit my 2-year mark, and they wanted to get rid of me before that happened. I was fired for being late to work. They would schedule me a 12-hour shift during the holidays, only to have me come back to work 5 hours later. It was a 30-minute drive to and from work, so at most, I'd be able to get 3 hours of sleep, and that was if I was lucky to fall asleep immediately. They did this several times. I tried to make it back on time, but I would be anywhere from a half hour to an hour late. I would always get the work done that needed to be done as well. Accused of sticking a note on a fellow employee's desk that read, "Your desk smells like onions." Management deemed this a serious harassment violation because the victim said that she felt intimidated by the offense. A handwriting analysis was done by management, and I was one of 2 matches. I did not do it and lost a bit of respect for management that day. I was yelled at, like a child, in front of my office mates, for wearing a sweater. My boss accused me of using it to agitate my allergies and make me sneeze. I have no idea what me sneezing would accomplish to benefit me. But there you have it, mind you. This was in Hawaii, and AC in buildings has 2 settings: broken and walk-in freezer. Guess what ours was set to? She was demoted a month later and transferred. So the story has a happy ending. I once used the phrase "more than one way to skin a cat" around a manager who had never heard the phrase. She called me into her office later to ask why I was saying such disgusting things, accused me of being a sicko who kills animals, and then threatened to fire me if she heard anything like it ever again. I've worked as a city worker before. I was constantly told that working too hard. These old guys don't want to look bad as they sit around all day making lewd comments about girls that are too young for them. So they get mad at me for actually doing stuff. I almost got fired a few times because of it. Just made the days take forever. Pissed me off. I was accused of stealing toilet paper because I had a cold and was blowing my nose in the bathroom after I ran out of Kleenex. That same general manager threw a stapler at my head once. I should have gotten him fired, but I was happy just to leave. Usually when my bosses start throwing crap like this at me, they are warming up to firing me for something else they don't like but can't legally do anything about yet. I worked a pizza place for about 2 months before quitting. I was pretty bad at the job, but to top it off, the owners found the most random things to blame on me. We write a K or Q for king or queen sized pizzas on the order ticket. These customers wanted a king but the cooks made a queen on accident. The owner told everyone it was my fault for using the wrong pen on the ticket. I ended up quitting because the cooks moved a ticket to the in the oven spot before they made it. Honest mistake. However, my family was in the restaurant that day and overheard the owners telling the customers that it was my fault for putting the ticket in the wrong spot. When I asked the owner if she said that, she said no. I quit right then. Made a lot of money, but it was a terrible experience. I work in sales and my co-worker, who is quite paranoid, accused me of going in and making returns on his sales and transferring the sales to my name, which is complete bullshit. He was just trying to save face when he realized that most of his customers were actually returning their product because he had done a horrible job of getting them the right sizes, colors, etc. He was fired shortly afterward for incompetence. Edit. Should have said former co-worker. I'm pretty sure that any day now, my boss is going to have our HR manager send out a memo about breathing up air that is company property. Just recently, I was assigned to a one-day temp gig through the People Bank in Toronto. I showed up early, but it turned out they didn't have work for me. and sent me home. The agency then sent me an email accusing me of showing up late. And because of that they were going to only pay me a half day. I pointed out that I showed up early. And it was the person who hired me who was late. B. I had in writing that if I were being sent home, they'd pay me for the full day. They begrudgingly agreed to make it up to me. They stuck me with a gig moving bankers' boxes around for 3 weeks. And appear to be no longer offering me work. And this is an agency I had a relationship with for 12 years. Both as a worker and as a contractor. TLDR. Stay the fuck away from people bank. Office managers. Gotta love them. I work in a small office. And we have a second office. Even smaller. Across the street. Whenever we would get supplies, paper towels, toilet paper, soap, etc., someone from the other office would walk over and get what they needed. Our office manager didn't buy enough TP one day. And when she was leaving to go home that afternoon, she noticed that all the TP she bought was gone. She went back up to her desk and sent an email out basically saying that someone was stealing the TP. What had actually happened was people from across the street came and got most of it for their office. My boss and everyone else had a good laugh. A few weeks later he asked me to hang a picture up. I went to get some nails out of the closet and couldn't find any. I went and got some. Then told him that we were out. He immediately fired off an email to our office manager saying that someone had been stealing nails. And he wanted her to get to the bottom of it. TLDR. My office manager was dumb. I was told by the lady that I shouldn't wear jeans. Meaning the jeans I was wearing. I was sporting brown khakis. I said as much. They were brown cotton. And total khaki construction equals not jeans. She said that BC other people had complained and said they were jeans. She had to say something to me. Although I'm not employed by Reddit, I do happen to be employed. I've been accused of stealing pens. Sadly, the pens I stole actually had my name on them. As a then recent high school graduate, I received multiple cross pens with my name etched on them. However, according to the super sleuth, this was likely due to me etching it on while in the office in an effort to steal the pens. Yay for management. I was called a racist because I didn't really talk to or interact with one of my fellow employees beyond what was needed. I had to explain to my boss, who was also black, that I wasn't a racist, I just didn't talk to this girl because she was incredibly annoying. A woman had slipped and fell on the property, so my boss confronted me in front of my supervisor and stated that it was my fault the property was being sued for millions of dollars. His reason was that I did not get down on the floor, take the woman by the hand, gently stroke her hair and pat her hand all the while gently and in a comforting tone, informing her it will all be okay. So that when she was taken away in an ambulance and people told her to sue, she would be, "No, I can't do that. Not to insert my name." He was dead serious. And I could not look at my supervisor as he glanced at me from the side or else I was going to explode with laughter. TL. Doctor was told it was my fault for being sued for not touching a person in a particular manner. PS. Sorry for spelling. This Jewish girl I worked with at the Warner Brothers store had a price sticker gun and put a sticker on my hand and said she was marking me down for Christmas. I put a sticker on her hand and said I was marking her down for Hanukkah. She reported me to the manager for anti-Semitism. I got written up. I was a counselor at a teen summer camp where the campground was shared by different camps. A 14-year-old girl from the ballet camp flashed the boys at our camp. Much cheering was had by them. I reported it to our director, and he accused me of making it up because ballerinas aren't sluts. It wasn't until one of the 15-year-old boys was bragging about seeing boobs to a boy who wasn't there within earshot of the director that he believed me. I worked at a bank for a while and was yelled at for being 10 cents short one day. I was literally asked to return the 10 cents. 10 fucking cents to a bank. That is 10 pennies. Or 2 nickels. Maybe even 1 dime. 10 cents. I still laugh about it to this day. Edit. I got a lot of responses to this and would like to just mention that it was my first day. I probably became short because a lady asked me for about $5 and small change for her kids. I quit a little bit later because, as you can tell, my boss was an asshole. Thanks for all the responses. Hahaha. We had the crazy woman working for the guy in another office very angrily accuse one of the ladies in our office of misusing the bottled water to water plants. The tap water here is shit. BTW. And it kills plants. So we use the bottled water to water them. We thanked her for her concern. Then we pointed out that the water cooler belonged to our office. And not hers. And that we'd appreciate it if she didn't use our water since she wasn't paying for it. I like to believe her head exploded when she received that email. Was doing some installer work a while back and supervisor customer accused me of not using existing holes. Customer said he put in floor for a wall mount plate but instead drilled my own, which I did. Issue is the holes they say were there weren't when I arrived, but I know customer went back and put them in after I left to file a complaint to get paid for damages later on. I fought it a few days till they said they were going to take money from my checks each week. Then I pulled out cell phone with the pictures I took to prove it. Not another word was said and I walked out, quitting a few weeks later. You shouldn't and I won't put up with that kind of shit. I used to work in a hostel that was a little bit shit. The owner did all his own repairs and everything was falling apart. One night the toilet broke and leaked into the room below it. When he went to fix it, the owner thought he saw footprints on the cistern, the back bit. He came downstairs ranting and raving and accused me of standing on the toilet so I could spy on the person in the next cubicle. For some reason, me being a sexual deviant was a much more logical reason than the team of drunk Welsh rugby players broke it. I was like 14 working at a concession stand for a concert. They told me and my friend to go make cotton candy, so we did. Maybe 10 minutes later they come down and tell us they are missing 7 pounds of cotton candy and accused us of eating all of it. Two 14-year-old boys eating 7 pounds of cotton candy in 10 minutes. It was a silly place. I just got fired last week for 4 minutes of time theft, and then my job got given to the manager's girlfriend's brother. Little suspicious there. Do you work on Arrakis? Because water belongs to the tribe, so if you're not part of the tribe then you are stealing. Can you imagine being the CEO and getting that email? I can just imagine the look on his face. Or, maybe worse, being the HR person and knowing that no matter how ridiculous you think this situation is, you have to pretend to take it seriously. One of my managers, we'll call him Manager, called me to tell me I was late to work even though I knew my shift didn't start for another hour. By the time I got to work, another manager, we'll call him Manager B, realized what was happening. Manager B told Manager that he had actually scheduled me for an hour later. But after the schedule had been posted he took it down and changed it without telling anyone. Manager B told Manager that it was totally his fault. Manager B assured me I was not in trouble at all and thanked me for coming in early. Right after this, Manager called me into his office to ask me what I was going to do so that this wouldn't happen again. I answered something that sounded like what he wanted to hear. What I should have said was nothing because I did nothing wrong. Next time I will have grown up hair and will not stand for this type of shit. Note: capitalization is all off due to my phone capitalizing only what it wants to. TLDR got in trouble for coming into work early by the same manager who asked me to come in early. Because I stood up to my boss over my request to be compensated for meeting with a company customer on my own time. She accused me, first to my co-workers, then to me directly, of not working very hard and not really wanting that job. Because my parents are financially stable and since I'm an only child, I'll inherit everything when they die. So there's no reason for me to work now. I was 24-25ish at the time and my parents are like 50 something and both quite healthy. So it's not like my parents are in any immediate danger of dying. She even said she only wants people who really want to work here, as in people too desperate for work to ever think about standing up for themselves. Shift ended at 12 o'clock. I clocked out at 11 hours, 59 minutes, and 59 seconds. 1 second early. Temporary boss wrote me up because it was the principle of it. Since he was temporary, we had to do it in front of a real manager. So for fun I just kept saying, "Walter, you're right. I left early. But can you confirm that this is 1 second?" By the third time I said it, the actual manager was laughing hysterically and tore up the write-up. If you've ever worked at a call center, you know how it's filled with Machiavellian corporate ladder climbers who have no idea that they're actually at a dead-end job with no corporate ladder to climb. In fact, I'll say what I always used to tell people that worked at that call center with me. Your life is like Back to the Future II. Somewhere in your life, Old Biff stole the almanac and completely split off your life into an alternate timeline where you're stuck at this call center. Your job is to find out what went wrong in your life and go back and fix it. I worked at a paintball park and I typically did the register. I had my best friend helping me that day because it was very busy. She typically worked in another department. At the end of the day, my supervisor counted out the drawer and claimed I was $50 short. Immediately, fingers were pointed and we were both to blame. Apparently we stole it and were going to use their measly $50 to take us out for a nice dinner or some bullshit. My supervisor was not very fond of me. Whatever. She was a cunt dragon and I hated her anyways. My friend and I both started an uproar and had a fuck this place attitude about it. But of course, they eventually found the money. This story wasn't that great. But I just recently left that shitty job. And I just wanted to reminisce on the bullshit. Thank you. I work in the stockroom of a major retail store at a mall. I was accused of not properly putting clothes into our shelves and instead just throwing them on top of the shelf. The person who reported me was an overnight worker. I don't work overnight. Needless to say, the accusation got turned over because it made no sense. I was accused of not working because my boss didn't see any results. I work as software tester quality assurance. As a result, I was forced to write a diary every day and explain what all the technical stuff I wrote to developers meant. I also had to note how many HRS I spent doing what, and explain what everything meant because my boss had zero knowledge in anything software related. Or anything tech for that matter. In college, I picked up a job at a deli, working a few days a week. The manager was a complete asshole. He used to get drunk in the office and one time I walked in to find him eating mushrooms. I love mushrooms. But at work they sound terrible. So basically the guy was not only an asshole, but an idiot as well. Anyway, one day I was scrubbing and mopping the floor. 2 hours I finally finished. My manager walked out and looked at the floor. He got an angry look on his face and yelled, "This looks like shit." Then he had the audacity to kick the bucket over and tell me to do it again. The dirty water spread out. I snapped the mop in half and walked out the door. The end. One time my boss took me in his office to tell me I was fired for stealing post-it notes. I burst into tears and he still waited a while to tell me it was a joke. Fucking wanker. I was working at a 7-Eleven in New York during the big blackout of 2003. We had to stay open until we ran out of flashlights, ice etc. and had thrown out all the perishables. One of the guys I worked with tried to molest me in the dark back room of the store. I told my boss and instead of disciplining the guy at all, he insinuated that I was at fault for putting myself in that situation. At my insistence, he finally had him apologize, insincerely, and continued to schedule us for shifts together. I decided to quit after I got another job. The boss, also owner, told me I was burning my bridges. I told him 7-Eleven was not a bridge to anywhere I want to go. He smirked. I am now finishing up my second year at a well-regarded law school preparing for an average pay, high karma career as a child advocate. I will be interning with one of the best child advocacy outfits in the New York this summer. Thinking of stopping in for a Slurpee. There are millions of managers and supervisors in this country who don't have the skills to be in charge of anyone, let alone groups of workers. You were just borrowing the water, right? Bring it back to the office manager in a bottle when you're done with it. I got written up for foul language by the guy who routinely calls his assistant a worthless stupid cunt in front of everyone. When I was 17 I was the assistant manager at a branch of a startup video game store. The manager who hired me kept getting grief for hiring someone who was too young. And then when she went on maternity leave, the pressure to get rid of me increased. Eventually our district manager made up some bullshit story about how I had supposedly given the store's alarm code to my girlfriend. They suspended me without pay. And I decided to find another job. I found out later that my store had been making more money than every other branch combined. And that once I left, all the parents and kids I'd built relationships stopped shopping there. The company went under within 6 months. TLDR. Got screwed. Left. Company went under. Back when I was 16, I worked at Krispy Kreme. Me, along with the only 2 black employees there, were accused of stealing $30,000 from the company. No evidence or anything. Pretty sure they were just looking for an excuse to fire the 2 black guys and the youngest kid there. I worked at my friend's mom's Korean restaurant that she had just opened. Bitch was crazy. She ended up firing everyone in the restaurant except her relatives and close friends. I got fired for allegedly stealing a feather duster. A feather duster? Why would I steal a feather duster? I was 17 at the time and barely cleaned my room, so what would I have done with the feather duster? I assume they cost less than $2. I'm pretty sure that if I were to use one, I would have no qualms with buying one of my own. She also fired her best waiter because she thought that he stole a bottle of water. Needless to say, the restaurant went out of business within the first year of its opening. Stealing water would be a huge problem if you were part of the Freeman Melange industry. While working at Target, my son overheard a little girl, who was obviously distressed, tell her mother that a strange man had reached under her dress and touched her. The lady freaked and started yelling at the man, who ran for the exit. My son gave chase and ended up following him into another store and then out into the parking lot. My son but lost him in the parking lot traffic. Cops came, and my son was able to tell them what the guy looked like and where he was last seen. They caught the guy, and the little girl, the mother, and my son identified him. Head of security at Target told my son he'd be fired if he ever did anything like that again. Apparently, keeping little girls safe is not high on their priority list. I worked at a restaurant for my first job like most teenagers. I was the dishwasher in a seafood restaurant, so I always wanted to clean the dishes really well because stale seafood smells awful. We also had baked broccoli and cheddar that was inside a small metal bowl that was impossible to clean because the scrubber was too small to fit in the bowl. My solution to this was to blast them with extremely hot water until everything came out and then scrub the best I could. Well, one day the owner comes up to me and tells me I'm using too much water. So I stopped using so much water and then got in trouble for the plates and metal bowls not being clean enough. So I started using more water again. This cycle went on until I quit a couple of weeks later. I'm going to hazard a guess and say that the issue isn't actually with the water. It's with you. She has some beef with you and is trying to make your life miserable. It's not about the water. I would watch my back for a while with her. I had upper management call me a communist once because I'd accidentally unionized and resigned with my entire store. Somebody with a personal grudge against me complained to my boss that I sigh too loudly and it distracts her. This is a person who spends all day chatting on the phone and with co-workers about personal stuff. He just laughed in her face and told her he would not even bother mentioning this to me because it's a ridiculous complaint. But then he told me anyways for the lulz. This is a person who I am pretty sure is just jealous of me transferring to a new position while she hates her job and her life. Rather than be happy for me. She has been spiteful in other ways too. Oh well. Haters gone hate. I worked in a souvenir shop at an amusement park. It was the 4th of July. One of the busiest days because of the park's fireworks show. We were also understaffed. The shop was just inside the gate, so it would get swamped just before closing. As people bought the stuff they didn't want to walk around with all day. I was left alone in the shop just before closing time running the cash register as people flowed in. It was utter chaos. While closing out the register that night, it was noticed that a large stuffed animal had been stolen. The manager simply could not fathom that one person manning a swamped store can't prevent theft because not all the displays are within sight of the register. I think it must have been a team effort, with 1 or 2 people getting my attention in one area while the other walked off with a toy. But I didn't say that because I really didn't know when or how it happened. Bastard accused me of being in on it and looking the other way while a friend stole it so we could profit later. I didn't even know what to say. I was 17. It was my first job, and I cried for days under the assumption that every job I'd ever hold would be like that one. I was accused of stealing a Coke from the Coke machine at a register. They fired me even though the loss prevention agent said he knew I paid for the Coke. Scumbag video rental job. Incentivizes sales of movie candy bundles. Punishes me for being too pushy when I make top sales that month as the newest team member. I had a boss who was alright, but every now and then he would get pissed off and take it out on his employees. I was an awkward teenager and I was just given the prestigious duty of scrubbing a massive white tarp with bleach and water for hours until it was sparkling. I ended up using the last of the bleach before I finished one side and my boss comes storming up to me asking why I wasted all the bleach. About 1/4 of a gallon was left when I started, on the bottom side and not the side that would be seen by clients. He chewed me out for 3 minutes straight and then I went to the store and came back with another bottle 5 minutes and $8 later and finished the job. I worked for a big box retailer who wrongfully accused me of theft. I asked them during our final meeting if I could see their evidence. They said no. I then told them that if I was guilty of theft, they ought to charge me with theft and have me arrested. After leaving the room for a few moments, my manager came back and told me I was no longer being fired for theft, but for breaking company trust. Needless to say, I have my clean conscience and a way better job now. I used to be a salesman in the electronics section of a department store. I had a customer complain to my sales manager that I was staring at his wife's breasts and he wanted me fired for it right now. My SM walked up to me with tears running down his face. He was laughing so hard for 2 reasons. 1. I was the top salesman in the entire chain of stores at the time. 2. I'm gay. Never saw the customer again. For fun. Take a gallon container to work tomorrow. I've had tons of bosses that have almost always been totally incompetent and most often they are rewarded lavishly by the companies we work for being very concerned about stupid things. They are stupid, incompetent, and immoral and in almost every case make more and more money because of it. I was fired from Sears for getting a second job. This was after my supervisor okayed it and then denied ever doing so in the meeting where they fired me. My supervisor was always very two-faced like that, sucking up to the store manager whenever possible and lying whenever necessary. I'm glad to be working in a better environment now, but it sure as hell taught me that retail was not for me. I had worked at a manufacturing plant first as a janitor but later in the electronics testing area. About 6 months after starting the electronics position, my boss calls me into his office and shuts the door. He proceeds to tell me that somebody told him I was spending an excessive amount of time in the bathroom. I pulled out my bottle of pills for my ulcerative colitis and he got very embarrassed. I had worked as a janitor through a number of flares, rarely missing any work because of it, but nobody complained about my bathroom habits. Now some busybody decided to monitor my bathroom habits. I tried to find out who it was, never did, because if he was so interested in my bowel habits, I should leave him one to examine for himself. For your information, during a flare, my BMs were usually a blood and pus filled runny pile of shit that probably would have made him want to burn his desk to ashes. I worked at a small computer shop for a while. Had a customer come in with a laptop that had gone through airport security. It wouldn't boot. Missing MBR. I quickly flip it over to find the hard drive caddy was about 1/8 of an inch out. Gently slide it back in and flip computer over. Boots up and runs fine. I grab a screwdriver and a small screw to secure the hard drive caddy for the lady. She is happy and asks how much. I tell her no charge, just tell her friends and come back to see us if she has any computer issues down the road. She slides me a $20 bill. The store manager, only other person that worked in the store besides me, yelled at me for not charging the lady a $75 bench fee. He went so far as to threaten to fire me for helping the customer steal a screw. In the end she returned and spent a few thousand on multiple systems for her company. And sent in quite a few referrals. TLDR, don't charge for a screw. Get bitched at by boss. Customer returns and spends thousands because I fixed her computer and didn't charge for a screw. I used to work at a retail store and I had a beard. One day my boss told me to get rid of my beard, so I came back the next day with a mustache. I was then told I had an attitude problem. Reddit is a terrible place to work at. I once worked for a woman who just did not like me. I made a strong point to do what I was told. And do it well. I tried to take initiative on projects. And work hard so I could move up and out from under her. So then comes my annual review. She give me all below average marks and tells me I won't be receiving my annual raise. Nor was I eligible for any promotion or transfer. Flustered, I asked her why. What had I done to receive such low scores? Her response? Boss. Well, whenever I tell you to do something, you just nod and do it me. Well, yes. Are you saying I'm a poor employee because I don't argue with you? Boss. Well, I think these are fair scores me. I think you are wrong. There's an argument for you. Yeah. Then she dumped me on Graveyard for 3 years. Employees of Reddit. Apostrophes don't mean no shit. Here comes an S. I was told once that I only had a half smile as a serious performance critique in a customer service job. I have a small mouth. WTF do you want me to do about it? I hope they don't take it away. Ours was taken away from us at work. It did leak one day but it was fixed. But they decided we couldn't have it downstairs anymore. They were sick of people having drinks when we got thirsty. So it's no on the top floor in the staff room. We aren't allowed to go up there unless we are on break or putting our stuff up. I forgot to bring in a bottle of water one morning and thought I would just get some water from the cooler. It wasn't there. I asked why and got a lecture on how it was my fault. I didn't know it was gone and I couldn't get any water. I needed to take my painkillers for my leg. But my break was at 3 PM. It was 9 AM at this point and I hadn't had breakfast either. I asked to go out and grab a bottle from next door and I wasn't allowed. 4 hours later when the manager came in I asked him about it and he finally let me get a drink. Annoyingly, I am the only one who seems to refill the cooler as well. The water is kept on the second floor so I have to climb 2 flights of stairs with the water to get it to the cooler. I have a bad knee leg and no one else will do it. The guys complain it's too heavy. The guys there are such wimps sometimes. My manager, messed up, can't see that keeping me off schedule and then putting me on for 1 day every 2 weeks or so is hurting the store. I go to work after 2 weeks of being out of the loop. I can't sell the games I don't know about. Because I'm not a gamer anymore. I can't buy them. I end my 1 day with low percentages. And 2 weeks later I do it again. He honestly believes I am to blame when the store does poorly. Edit. I emailed HR 2 days ago regarding the fact that he openly despises me. No answer. Tried calling. But the number directs me to a call center that isn't owned by the company. I was reprimanded for using foul and abusive language during a meeting in which I walked out after saying I don't have to take this crap. What prompted that was my boss repeatedly saying the following remarks over and over again. If you think you are so tough, I will take you outside and kick your fucking ass. You aren't as smart as you fucking think you are. I can do your fucking job. You piece of shit. I should just have you fired cause you are fucking worthless. There were others. But those are the ones that I really remember. The meeting went on for 2 hours of his verbal abuse. So glad they laid me off. Hated every moment of working there. My boss 10 years ago accused me of stealing a $500 cell phone. I worked for a wireless company. I told him I never did that. Why would I? He continued to pressure me for an hour to give up hiding the cell phone or face getting fired. I then called the number. It was in his shirt pocket the entire time. When I was 22, I worked for the US Census Bureau as an enumerator, the people who go door to door and ask you questions. My first day of training. I walked into the church house classroom wearing all black and in high heels. I was 5 minutes late. Everyone turned around and stared at me. Every single person in that room was at least 60 years old with silver hair. My atheist self sat next to Glenda, the preacher's wife. The second day of training I dress way more casually. I take a medication that makes me very woozy at times, so on my break I was lying down on a picnic bench outside of our classroom. Glenda came up to me and asked me what was wrong. Oh. I explained I take some medicine that makes me feel dizzy and nauseated. It's okay. I'm used to it. She came up closer, behind me, and started to rub my back. I felt very awkward. She kept going lower and lower until she was massaging my butt. I've always been an introvert and had no idea what to say. After the preacher's wife massaged my butt for a moment, she spanked me and walked away. I've posted this before, but my boss thought I was goofing off in the restroom. For a few months there he wouldn't let me flush the toilet until he came in and made sure I actually used it. If you want to get nothing in return, you can like and join my Discord. There is a link in the description.